Believe it or not, but Neverwinter Nights 2 is not just bugs and bad camera, it's also dead-end subplots and cut content. I've already covered the original campaign in general, so now let's take a look at the smaller picture and see how much good stuff was removed from the Shardbearer's companions. Let's start with one of the most butchered ones, Neeshka. It's obvious that her infernal heritage was to be explored more and that Mephasm was probably involved. It's also obvious that she was to be the second love interest for male protagonists, but I also found some not so obvious pieces of cut content to her. The first is Rains, the third and the final thug set by Lelden to kill Neeshka, probably the strongest of the lot too. Rains was a sadistic psycho with really screwed up ideas for killing Neeshka. I think strangling her with her own tail deserves the special mention here. Ironically, I think Neeshka is a psycho too, and a very creepy kind at that, since she doesn't seem to realize that she's evil. I mean, in this encounter, she says things like, "Always nice to see old friends again, Rains. Feel free to keep on bleeding. I'm sure someone will come by to clean up after you." She says equally screwed up things in the final game too, on at least a couple of occasions. How her alignment is true neutral, I'll never understand. In any case, in the post-fight conversation, she says one more noteworthy thing, quote, "It's nice to know I haven't been forgotten. Nothing worse than being ignored." Obviously, it's half sarcastic in this case, which is pretty disturbing given that the conversation is happening over a bunch of corpses, but it is a nice hint about Neeshka's need for attention and validation. It also foreshadows her betrayal of low-influence Shardbearers, and conversely, her somehow being able to break out of Blackgarious Gaius for high-influence characters. So this particular line should have definitely been kept in one of the two earlier encounters. Speaking of betrayal, originally it was Neeshka who sabotaged the gates of the Crossroad Keep during the siege. What's more, she did it because of an infernal pact with Zaxxas, you know, the big stinking Hezro. The voice files are still there, so let the characters do the talking.
The siege of your Crossroad Keep. It succeeded in great part due to the surrender of a soul, a pact that was made that cannot be broken. My dear, Zaxxas calls your service due. He asks you to murder this one that has crossed him twice, and if you die, that pleases him as well.
I'm so sorry, but you wouldn't even have gotten this far. You would have died at your keep if I hadn't. I had to, I'm sorry. No, the only way to do it is to kill you, or else, if I don't, my soul belongs to Zaxxas, and I will be bound to the infernal regions forever.
I think the reason they removed that is that you wouldn't have been able to drag Neeshka back to your side. I mean, the threat of death and even that Gaius thingy Blackgarious put on Neeshka are not that bad by the near-epic adventuring standards. But in this version of the script, disobeying Garius means booking a one-way ticket to the abyss with Neeshka written on it. If you're interested, I explain how Afterlife works in the Forgotten Realms in my lore introduction to Mask of the Betrayer. Anyway, Neeshka simply doesn't have a choice in this scenario. Although, speaking of choice, Zaxxas? Really? I hope she was at least still a Marilith. Sticking to potential traitors, next up are Sand and Qara. Those two were not dimwits like Kelgar and Neeshka, and there was a lot more to them than what made to the final game. Let's start with Sand. We never learn why he's helping us exactly, why he would betray the party, and why he has only a modest shop in the Neverwinter docks, despite being a talented mage. Well, in a deleted cutscene at the beginning of Act 2, we would see Sir Nevalle come into Sand's shop in the docks. Here's their conversation.
Ah, I thought I smelled one of the 9, and Nevalle no less, not an aid. To what do I owe this rare honor, my liege?
I see your post at the docks hasn't improved your temperament, Sand.
Yes, well, it's a step up from the merchant quarter, less politics, until now. So, is there something you wish to interrogate me on, or can I go back to wondering where my life made such a sharp turn?
Something has happened, and I will need your talents to set it right.
Your post at the docks, as Nevalle put it, indicates that moving out of the merchant district was not Sand's choice, even though he claims otherwise. However, after a successful influence check, he would admit that he, quote, supplements his trade by supplying information to Lord Nasher concerning going-ons in the docks. This is an understatement, of course, because Sand doesn't appear to have a choice in the matter. I'm not sure if this particular piece of dialogue was cut though, but if not, then it's easily missed. It seems like it was cut, however, because we would have to ask Sand about, quote, Nasher's aid. And I don't think we encounter Sir Nevalle before Act 2, so the timeline wouldn't add up. Apparently, there also used to be a cutscene in the Sunken Flagon in which lots of noblemen from the Black Lake district would relocate to the tavern. Sir Nevalle, again referred to as Lord Nasher's aide, would ask Duncan to accommodate them. This is where we could ask Duncan about Nevalle, to which he would say that he, quote, comes to the Flagon on occasion, stops by Sand's shop, probably looking for some cheap charms. Honestly, to me it looks like Duncan might be a spy too. Think about it. An ex-adventurer turned innkeeper in a district that struggles with criminal activity, he's friends with Sand too, and both of them talk about selling charms. Sounds almost as if they were instructed to say so. You have to admit, this is an awful lot of coincidences. Another piece of Sand's backstory that was cut from the game is his connection to the Neverwinter Academy Wizard School. In a deleted conversation in the Moonstone Mask, DeSyntis, the headmaster of the academy, and Sand have a short exchange. Turns out, Sand used to have a teaching position at the academy but was removed at the request of DeSyntis. Sand also implies that DeSyntis sabotaged his reputation so that he would struggle to find work in the city. The exact reason why DeSyntis had a problem with Sand was never revealed, but I suspect it had something to do with Sand's moral attitude and his connection to Arcane Brotherhood. Sand, however, would mention he knows the reason why DeSyntis hangs out at the whorehouse and has no to little contact with his daughter, and those were, quote, very sad reasons, allegedly. Now, the good part here is that DeSyntis' daughter is Qara. Given that she was a dropout as well, the two probably weren't on good terms either. I smell a classic disappointed parent versus rebellious child subplot here. The wizard-sorcerer conflict certainly fits it. This conflict certainly isn't the only reason why Sand and Qara hate each other, even though it looks like it in the final game. The invisible part of a dialogue that remains in-game confirms that Sand's animosity towards Qara is exactly because she was the headmaster's daughter. Unfortunately, I failed to find anything that would explain Qara's relationship with her father. I did find one mention of their conversation that was supposed to happen at the Crossroad Keep, but sadly its content remains a mystery. As for Sand and Qara, in the final game their rivalry spans the entire campaign, but in the removed conversations it goes beyond childish bickering. There is even something referred to as the Influence War in the dialogue file. One part of their rivalry was the Animus, that Qara elemental that attacks several times if you have Qara in the party. In the removed dialogue, Sand would discover a way to defeat it permanently by having Qara restrain her power. The other option was to overload it, which Qara obviously preferred. At that moment though, she would practically admit to holding her power back by saying, quote, I could muster more power, but I've never released that much at once before. This is important, so remember it because we'll talk about it in a second. Another topic of this removed conversation with Qara was Sand's reason to stay in the party. She claims he envies the Shardbearer the power they wield and wants to be close to it, implying he had some hidden motives. She'd only say this if she was winning that influence war though. Well, it does sound like Sand to have hidden motives, but on the other hand, why did Qara stay with the party? I mean, the fact that she was a waitress at Duncan's to begin with was preposterous enough. Can you imagine her customer service? Oh, your chicken is burned, would you like to join it? Either way, in the final game it looks like Sand is the good guy and Qara has no redeeming qualities. Such writing is either bad or incomplete, and I'm willing to give Obsidian the benefit of the doubt. In any case, their personal rivalry and potential hidden motives don't explain why one of them would ally themselves with the King of Shadows. Qara maybe makes some slight sense given that Garius promises to further her powers with no limitations, but Sand's motivation to betray the party makes no sense at all. The good news is, there is an explanation in a cutscene removed from Act 3, and a fully voiced one too. It would only play if the Shardbearer had more influence with Qara than Sand though, to foreshadow his imminent betrayal. Let's hear it.
I am surprised you sought out a campfire when you could simply make one yourself.
Maybe I was waiting for something to burn, like you. Maybe I could torch some of those precious books you're always reading, or your worthless spell book.
Is that your way of expressing your disdain for such learning by consuming it? You have power, girl. It is a shame you limit it with your ignorance.
Ignorance? I have no limits, Sand. Is that why you challenge me? Because you see such power and can never wield it? You are a sad little thing, Sand. You squat at the altar of magic, desperate to know it, yet it is forever out of your reach. It must be maddening to see it in me. Mad enough to try and harm me, I think.
You are a threat. A threat to us all.
No, not all. But tell whomever you want. They will not believe you, and they need my power, for you are far too weak. Challenge me again, Sand, and I will show you your weakness. I promise you.
Looks like you two've had a falling out.
She's dangerous. She needs to be stopped.
Really? And how would one do that?
Now, remember that this late in the game, Sand is a high-level wizard, and he was terrified of what he saw. That alone is an indication of how powerful Qara truly was and how underpowered she was playing to be. I think the scene would have a very similar feel to the one at Ammon Jerro's haven when the old man gets really pissed off at our party. Who the hell cut this in favor of some shit like the Wendersnaven? Was Obsidian coached about setting priorities by a drug addict or something? At any rate, Bishop's involvement in the cutscene is also interesting. When he asks about a way to stop Qara, it's very similar to him talking to Grobnar about a way to control the golem. It makes sense that Bishop would probe other party members in preparation for the upcoming betrayal. It would also make sense for Garius to have Bishop look for internal conflicts and other weaknesses that could be exploited. Back to underpowered characters, Ammon Jerro is far more powerful than the game lets on to, though his abilities were downplayed for game balance alone. Unlike Qara, he had no reason to hold anything back. I mean, this dude trained in Neverwinter, Lasken, Thay, and Waterdeep. He even had demon and devil teachers. He successfully bargained with Levistus, ruler of the Fifth Hell, to locate the Silver Sword of Gith, and the Still Lord even threw in Mephazem's service as a bonus. Then, Ammon dueled the King of Shadows, and it ended with a draw when the Silver Sword shattered, banishing the king to the Plane of Shadow and sending Ammon to the Nine Hells. But this guy was too angry to stay dead and damned. When Black Garius summoned him, Ammon gave him the middle finger and escaped, enslaved 6 powerful fiends, and wanted a rematch with the King of Shadows. And we are to believe that a bunch of level 15 peasants beat him in his own haven? If he'd had a build reflecting his actual power, he would have smeared our party all over the walls while juggling blast globes. The ritual of purification is the only reason why he needed the Shardbearer and his rabble for anything. Hell, even Nephris in Mask of the Betrayer knew better than killing Ammon, as if she knew that death is not enough to stop him. Alright, let's leave Ammon but stick to Jerro, Shandra Jerro, as she also suffered from the content cuts. Deleted conversations reveal she originally had healing abilities from her time as a novice in a temple. With high enough influence, Shandra would admit she never finished her cleric training, haunted by her failed attempt to heal her sick mother, who suffered greatly before passing away. This left her afraid to heal others. Pressed further, she'd confess another reason: the overwhelming expectations placed on priests to provide not just physical healing, but emotional and spiritual answers. Feeling helpless, she abandoned priesthood. If confronted about this, she'd get furious and defensive though. Who knows, maybe it was something we could help her deal with and eventually re-level her as a cleric? Similarly to Helgar's quest to become a monk, which is a bit of a noob trap. But seriously, there might just be something to it. If we visited West Harbor with her and talked to Brother Mering, he would say to her, quote, "You have something of the priesthood about you, but not the path of the Morning Lord, it seems." The most obvious bet for Shandra is Shantia, of course, the goddess of life, bounty, and agriculture. In another cut conversation, Shandra would ask the Shardbearer about their teacher after reminiscing about childhood. Strangely, no response option exists. It seems the Shardbearer might have had a mentor tied to their backstory, like Tarmas for the wizard's apprentice background. But it appears it's another thread that Obsidian never cleaned up. Moving on, Bishop was also subject to some cuts. The first one is pretty funny dialogue thread with the Githyanki mage who killed Amy in West Harbor and then kidnapped Shandra. The voice files are still there, so I'll let the characters do the talking.
Githyanki men typically serve the Lich Queen from the astral home. You travel with and lead male servants. Do you not find them too fickle and weak of mind for anything but simple tasks?
She may be evil, but she is so right.
Tell me about it.
Why, I've never observed that. Have I?
Well, I admire a good princess.
Most males are too weak in their mental disciplines to be proper leaders or warriors. Yes, they do. I have been away from the astral home for some time and have not indulged myself. Perhaps your human servant, the tall, dark one, would suffice. Give him over to me willingly, and I can offer you a faster, painless death.
You can't possibly pay me enough. And even if you could, I'd need a few kegs of Duncan's ale first. Just try it. See what happens.
It seems that you do not keep a tight leash on this servant. Pity. You may have a point. Were it not my mandate to slay you, I should like to experience what men of your race have to offer. Still, perhaps the Eyrie will permit me to experiment with your corpse.
I'm not sure why this was removed. Maybe the wizards didn't approve it, or maybe it was the Githyanki mage's character model. I mean, up to that point, I was convinced this mage was a dude. Who knows? On a more serious note, another deleted subplot would take us to the ruins of Red Fallow's Watch, Bishop's home village in the Mare of Dead Men. This was a part of the Circle of the Mare quest, but in the final game, we are taken straight to our destination. The burned remains of Red Fallow's Watch would be a bit of a mystery that we could solve. It would quickly become clear that it wasn't the King of Shadows forces that destroyed it. The place and its atmosphere are strange. Piles of burned corpses of soldiers or mercenaries lie alongside carefully buried villagers. Valuables remain untouched, as if everyone left, or rather tried to leave, in a hurry. But whoever buried them did so with great care. Most unusually, Bishop would get angry at Neeshka for poking through the belongings of the dead. He would also refuse to go to the circle, apparently staying behind to pay his respects to the dead villagers. While Bishop does reveal the story before the final fight if you have high enough influence with him, seeing Red Fallow's Watch firsthand would have been a richer experience. Quite parallel to seeing West Harbor attacked and destroyed. It definitely looks like Bishop was originally designed as an evil mirror of the canon Shard Bearer, a tragic figure who is doomed in this life and the next. His dialogue, both cut and that which remains in-game, hints at envy and regret. That he is a villain and a coward, not a hero. Jezebel, one of the devils trapped by Ammon Jerro, actually reveals things about Bishop that he dared not admit to himself. Quote, "For every hero, Ranger, 1,000 fall. For every one born of West Harbor, there are 1,000 weaker, driven from their homes in shame. But what makes my life so sweet, my existence so sweet, is those that step back when such things wound them, and for whom every kindness shown them lashes them like a whip." She also read him beautifully when he called her out on letting herself be trapped in a summoning circle. Quote, "Trapped in circles. Such curious words. Are they taken from a memory, Ranger? A memory that carries the scent of blood with it? How long has it been since you defended a woman as you have now? Shown a kindness? Or has life been servitude, always trapped in one circle within another, ever narrowing?" Before the final fight, Bishop does finally muster the strength to admit all of it. To confess almost, to himself and to the Shard Bearer. In my opinion, he hated himself all along, but projected that hate outwards to protect himself from the world that kept reminding him of that. That's why he embraced the oblivion of the Wall of the Faithless, I believe. His deliverance. And this is also why I think cutting out Bishop's romance was actually serving the story instead of the fans. A tough choice, but a good one. And in this case, Obsidian did tie every loose end. Come to think about it, it's funny how practically only evil characters are well written and voice acted in Neverwinter Nights too. So what about the do-gooders? Well, Casavir also visited the chopping block and came back missing some parts. Of his content too. To start off, it seems most people hate Old Owl Well, but it appears we've been treated with the shortened version of it as it is. Casavir would have his own base of operations somewhere in the neighborhood. It seems he also either had a second-in-command named Droman, or, which is also likely, it was Column with a different name. Happens quite a bit actually. For instance, Lorne was named Alec earlier. As for Casavir's removed backstory, it was a tale of love and betrayal. Casavir and Ophala, the proprietor of the Moonstone Mask, had a romantic relationship, but at the same time, she was to marry one Lord Pierval. Ultimately, Casavir chose paladinhood over her, but soon he was attacked by Lord Pierval's son, Harkis, and killed him. Casavir then chose to run and die in battle. Naturally, after we've beaten the terrible Old Owl Well, we could return to Neverwinter with the disfavored paladin, and thus run into an old friend of his, Mordrin. The voice files are still there, so let's have a listen.
Casavir, Ophala said you had returned. I did not believe it.
I should never have left, Mordrin. You had only my safety in mind, but there are greater things that I should face.
Have your vows robbed you of your sense? You endanger not only your life, but Ophala as well. Do you care so little for her that you would see Lord Pierval's rage fall upon you both?
I intend to answer for it. Ophala committed no crime, and I am the only one who shall suffer. I will go to Lord Pierval, tell him the truth, and let punishment fall upon me as it should have. I will have no more blood shed for me this day.
Casavir, you are always the stubborn one. The gates to Blacklake are closed. Lord Pierval cannot meet with you yet, but let me see what I can do to smooth things with him before you meet. I will try to convince him again what happened was an accident. Until then, keep your head down and say nothing of your return to anyone else. I fear for not only your safety, but Ophala's. I will contact you again when I hear more.
Who's the mark? Smells of nobility.
A friend who has already risked much for my sake.
Looks like he has more to lose. If his purse is any indication, might be worthwhile to pay his home a visit.
Later on, when the Blacklake district is reopened, we would meet Mordrin again and...
Good. You have come. I am afraid the news is not good, my friend. Who are these others you have brought?
They can be trusted, Mordrin. I fought with them in Old Owlwell.
Very well. Casavir, I met with Lord Pierval. It did not go well. He may not listen to you.
Then that is a risk I must take.
I fear he may threaten Ophala if... Who are you? What do you want?
Nothing, your lordship. We're just looking to have a talk with your temple-faring friend there.
We have a message, but we'll let our daggers speak for us.
It seems Lord Pierval has struck quicker than I thought. That can only mean...
Ophala, we must go to her at once. If they struck at me, they may have harmed her.
Eventually, during the confrontation with Lord Pierval, it would turn out that the man who orchestrated these events was Mordrin himself. He wanted Ophala too and was jealous big time. Since he was the one who passed letters between Casavir and Ophala, he could and did manipulate the involved parties. He led Harkis to believe Casavir forced himself on Ophala and provoked him to attack the paladin. It is also heavily implied he was the one who advised Casavir to flee Neverwinter. Obviously, with Casavir back in town, things would quickly get nasty again. However, if we visited, or rather broke into Mordrin's home, we could find all the letters Casavir and Ophala exchange and use them to convince Lord Pierval that Casavir is a victim too, and he never meant to kill Harkis. This would be one of the few cases where Neeshka's kleptomania would come in handy. Of course, everything could go to shit as well, and we would have added 2 extra nobles to the Blacklake district obituaries. And that's more or less it. To be honest, it's not a story that would save Casavir from being a boring take on the paladin class. I mean, it would have been fine for a persistent world character, but I expected more from the writers at Obsidian. Ophala is also downplayed big time, as she used to be a pretty powerful adventurer and a member of the many-starred Cloaks too. But in Neverwinter Nights 2, she seems to be just a nosy brothel keeper. Alright, to wrap up the Companions cut content, let's talk about gathering our party. There is a cut quest called Neverwinter whose goal is to find a way to Neverwinter. Based on the 2 journal entries I found, we would have to figure out that the high road is a no-go and that hopping on a ship in Highcliffe is our best bet. In the final game, everything is conveniently orchestrated right from the start by Daeghun, including a ship, false tracks, and disinformation about our route, all in an hour or so while we were gone to the swamps. Well, nothing screams last-minute cuts louder than a captain standing in front of a tavern that can't be entered. And he's sober too. Finally, let's go back to the very beginning. In the final game, very little is known about the Shardbearer's mother. However, in a removed Act 2 conversation with Daeghun, he would reveal that Esmerelle was an adventurer and ran in a party with him, his wife Shayla, and some other folks. For obvious reasons, Esmerelle race and Shardbearer's father identity weren't specified as they needed to be whatever they needed to be. Eventually, the party dwindled, and Daeghun started suffering from the PTSD, having lost many friends to the perils of adventuring. When he and Shayla settled down in West Harbor, Esmerelle kept on adventuring, but would occasionally visit them. One time, she came back pregnant and stayed in the village to raise her child. This was when she made Shayla promise she would take care of the future Shardbearer should anything befall her. It was never Esmerelle's intention to have Daeghun be the foster father. However, when both Esmerelle and Shayla died, Daeghun decided to fulfill his wife's promise. This is interesting because there apparently is, or at least initially was, an orphanage in West Harbor ran by Brother Mering. Sadly, the game never addresses any of it. In fact, you can't even initiate dialogue with Daeghun in Act 2. What's also worth mentioning is that Shayla wanted to have children of her own, but Daeghun couldn't have them. One theory is that Shayla was a halfling, and there are no half-halflings as far as the Realmslore goes. Besides, what would they be? Quarterlings? You know, it's kind of funny seeing how the lore does mention things with outright disgusting implications, like half-ogres or half-gnolls. Anyway, the hint that Shayla was a halfling is the Arvorine's Amulet of Aid hidden in the chest in Daeghun's bedroom. In case you don't know, Arvorine is a halfling god of war. However, this theory is dubious at best, as the item is not restricted to any race, only to good and neutral alignments. The only racial restriction is that the creator must be a good aligned halfling. But if you really want to believe it, it does make some sense that Daeghun would hold onto it because of sentimental value. It could be a memento of Daeghun's adventuring days or his deceased wife. The item itself is pretty expensive in pen and paper D&D, as it costs over 4,000 gold pieces, which is probably a fortune by West Harbor standards. But as far as we can tell by what's actually in the game, it's just a regular item as it appeared in the original Neverwinter Nights, with no special story connected to it. And that's more or less it as far as anything meaningful is concerned. So, what do you think? Was Neverwinter Nights 2 on its way to becoming an all-time RPG classic before it was hit with the cuts? Or was mediocrity the best it could do anyway? Do share your thoughts down in the comments. Also, check out my previous video on cut quests, modules, and cutscenes if you haven't already. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the channel, and I'm off to work on the next one. See you soon.